Welcome to Conversations with John Harper, More Than Meets the Eye, which is part of an ongoing series. Sorry. My name is Rez Huseyin. I'm a student of the Diamond Approach, a spiritual path that I discovered through my work with the Enneagram. I'm joined by John Harper, Diamond Approach teacher, Enneagram guide, and author of 3 books, most recently Nurturing Essence, a compass for essential parenting. John, before we get on to the topic, do you want to address the concerns you had last week about our conversation on anxiety, fear, and terror?
Well, I think it might scare people off when they think about the emphasis that talk had on fear and terror. But, basically that's what's at the core of the ego. When we get on the spiritual path, we accumulate experience, positive experience. We get closer to all of the fruit and benefits of spiritual work. So by the time we're confronting the core of the ego structure, we usually have the support and enough experience, not only support with others like teachers and guides, but enough support and resiliency in our ego structure to face that in a way that is not, well, it's never debilitating to the soul. It's always debilitating to the ego.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to scare people off.
Mm.
I mean, the spiritual texts from time immemorial address it. That's the state of affairs. Better to have your eyes open going in than, be blindsided.
Definitely. And I really think it helps with, knowing all of that stuff up front really helps with not getting so lost in it when it happens.
And the fact that on the spiritual path, reality is drawing you to itself.
Mm.
And that magnetism is the magnetism of unity and love. That's pulling you toward that confrontation. It's pulling you to the moment of seeing through the constructed self and returning to your essence, to your true nature. So love is dragging you to the cliff, and love will take you over it, and love will be there on the other side of it. But it is not necessarily uh, an experience that the ego is all excited about signing up for. It thinks it
No.
is. It thinks it does on the spiritual path. The ego, its main thing is it wants to be around to be enlightened.
Mm.
You know, I mean, that's the big joke, that it's what's in the way of knowing what we are. It's not going to be around for the celebration.
So I thought what we could spend our next few conversations looking at is how specifically the Enneagram can support development. Um, and I want to start at the very beginning, so the process of typing. So the real developmental potential of the Enneagram is unlocked when we land in our type. And landing in it means seeing it, experiencing it, getting inside the texture of it rather than relating to it as a concept. Lots of people struggle with this, and lots of people mistype, and lots of people abandon the Enneagram altogether after not landing in a type, and all for good reasons. But it is a missed opportunity, I feel. And I guess you feel the same way about that, do you, John?
And I think you're spot on with what you're pointing to.
Yeah. So, I'm curious to hear about your own typing process. I am happy to share mine, which I can do briefly. It was the person that introduced me to the Enneagram also identified A type for me. I I agreed with her. It seemed like a good fit from the descriptions and from my limited reading of the Enneagram. A few years down the line, a teacher and someone with a lot more experience questioned my type, and that was met with a little more resistance. And when she identified the type, I mean, it was a very difficult, painful experience. It sort of put me in touch with a lot of conscious suffering, I think is the word, which is what led me to the spiritual work. So,
Are you saying that the teacher got it right and the other person didn't?
yes, the teacher identified the correct
So,
type.
so I'd be interested to know, were you originally identified as your stress point?
Yeah, that's a good question. I was originally identified with a type that I that is almost the opposite to my type, so type 7.
Ah, I'll tell you something interesting about type
Mm.
7. I attended training with Helen Palmer, and she had a 7 there. Gosh, what was that guy's name? It's so long ago. Corey? I don't know. He was a type 7, and he suffered from depression, and people often mistook him for a 4. And he laid it out quite clearly on why that can happen, and the fact that most people don't see a type 7 as having depressive qualities. It was really a subtle insight. Not that I remember it, except that 7 can look like type 4 at times.
Mm-hmm. I think I can definitely see that being the case. I think in my case, the person that typed me was just not very well studied in the Enneagram. And also, it says something about me, the way I trusted what other people were telling me about me more than being interested in engaging my own inquiry about it. But yeah, that was my situation. So I would be interested in to hear about yours, John. Was it a straightforward typing experience?
Well, I typed myself. I didn't rely on anybody else to type me. I was in the Diamond Approach, and friends, colleagues, fellow students encouraged me to study the Enneagram. And, that was at a very significant transition point in my life because I had always thought psychology was a bunch of crap, kind of inherited that from my father. So I was resistant to everything psychological. Nothing wrong with me that I couldn't straighten out. When I went into the Enneagram, I just approached it from the character traits, trying to figure it out that way, using Helen Palmer's book. And, I dialed it into maybe, let's say at the beginning, I discarded several types right away. Not that, not that, not that. No way. Okay. And then the remaining 5 or 6, I went back and really looked into them, and I got it down to maybe 3 types, like type 8, counterphobic 6, and type 1, maybe. And, I was struggling with it because some of those characteristics are just so common and overlap. And then I was reading about type 8. It's more defended movement to 0.5.
Mm.
It's like there's 80% of my life right there.
Mm.
And once I made that connection, and I made that connection phenomenologically, feeling that movement in myself, being able to feel the character structure of 8, feel that more defended movement to 0.5, and then actually feeling the other movement to type 2, which wasn't pleasant at all either. People seem to think that moving to your heart space is all butterflies and unicorns. But for type 8, that heart space is a kind of a needy mess, which is something we don't like.
Right, yeah, and that's so great that your typing journey has helped to illustrate a really useful way to, if you're unsure about your type, is to watch for that movement. The movement doesn't lie, but you've got to have quite a good inner eye, quite a good self-awareness to see that. I really do think that. I mean, my own self-awareness wasn't very good when I first encountered the Enneagram.
And for
Um,
me, the thing is, I came into this work through mysticism, not
mhm.
personal growth work or psychological work or any of that. Uh, and what I saw by looking at 5 was that my attraction to the mystical, to the cosmos, was a defense. Going to point 5, withdrawing from everything, going to the detached, mystical expanse of everything. And I got into, I was drawn, forced, however you want, beaten, however you want to see it. I was, whatever moved me, however you want to see that, to the spiritual work. Fundamentally, I reached a point where I decided seeking realization, God realization, enlightenment, cosmic consciousness, whatever you want to call it. What I confronted was I'm still a mess. Okay, I'm having all of these wild experiences, right? Spiritual experiences that people struggle to have or wish they had or whatever. I'm having all these cosmic experiences, and I'm still a jerk, you know. And in that little biographical thing, I say, you know, when the 10,000th person tells you you're an asshole, you know, maybe you need to stop and think, can that many people be wrong? And, yeah, well, that's where I was in my life. And I thought, I need to forget about all this mystical stuff. I need to figure out how to become a real human being. And
Mm,
that put me on a kind of in this transitional place that I was for a couple years, which eventually led me to pick up Almas's book, Diamond Heart, book 1, Elements of the Real in Man. And that just was like, whoa, okay. And then, you know, going to the group sessions and watching people work and people encouraging me to look at the Enneagram. And it was like, well, I guess I've got to take this right turn into the psychological and see
mhm.
what's what.
Well, good for you that you took the invitation there. And just to maybe reframe what John just said in probably slightly kinder terms, I don't know how much you know about integral philosophy, but it sounds like your spiritual development line was high for one reason or another. There was a lot of capacity there, and then maybe less capacity in the interpersonal and yeah, what are the other? Yeah, it sounds like maybe the interpersonal line of development.
Well, you know, you can bat that around, excuse me, from several perspectives, you know, past lives, whatever.
Mm,
But I was just a normal 19-year-old kid when I had an experience of essence descending into me.
hmm
And that was like, whoa, that's what put me on the spiritual path and anchored me into mysticism and that type of thing,
hmm
which totally got co-opted by my ego structure.
As it
And
would
and
at
and like I
19.
said, it turned that experience into a defense.
Hmm
Uh,
Yeah. Um, so I think it's important to include an understanding of the what we call the instincts as we're learning about the types. And the main reason I think that's important is because a lot of people when they get the Enneagram try to analyze their behavior from the perspective of a type, but actually a lot of our behaviors are coming from the instincts. Do you agree with that idea in theory, John, that an education of the instincts is useful to someone who's typing themselves with the Enneagram?
I can see that. I think the main thing is to look at the character traits, see what fits there. Okay, to look at the movement along, stress, and I forget what they call the other line. Uh, See that movement. When you start getting into instincts and wings and things like that, it can start turning into too much analysis in a way. But I think you're right on from the perspective that the instincts are driving a lot of behavior. So, how is the sexual subtype as opposed to the I'm just thinking, oh, I should tell you about mine.
I would like to
Realization.
know about, yeah, because you said initially you identified yourself as maybe a sexual subtype, but now see it was social all along, right?
Yeah. Here's a fun fact about John Harper. Uh, so I'm an Enneagram 8. I'm an Astrologically, I'm an Aries, and I was born in the year of the tiger. So I've got this kind of connection with aggression, which is in spades, right? Right. And so, of course, when I first learn about the subtypes, I immediately identify as a sexual subtype, which is, uh, all around kind of that one person independence, you know. Well, then eventually Hamid was teaching the instincts. And during that retreat, when he got to the social type, I went, oh my God, I'm a social subtype. It was like, and I had known about the Enneagram probably for 10 or 15 years at that point. Okay? But I wasn't spending a lot of time digging into it with the nuance that a lot of people uh, are interested in. But that was an eye opener. And seeing into that, what opened that up was the development of my heart. So all of the work around type 8, around vulnerability and the heart and what have you, was bearing a lot of fruition in my life. Okay? And it was that sensitivity in the heart, that capacity, when Hamid was teaching the instincts, that, my heart really connected with that, really saw the significance of, yeah, I'm really more of a people person. And, people see me and I self identify as kind of a social butterfly. I'll walk up and talk to anybody, and hey, how you doing? This type of thing. And I'd known for a long time, and I think this is an eight thing too, that friendships are very important to me. Very important to me. And so during the teachings on the instincts, that stood out. That came to the foreground when he was talking about the social instincts of, yeah, friendships are really important to me. And my heart made a connection with that subtype. And then it was a case of, you wake up to something and you go through life and you go, yeah, there it is again. I can see it there. I can see it
Yeah,
there. I can see it there.
that happens. That definitely happens. Yeah. And that just is a huge giveaway what you just said about friendships being really important to you. Such a social instinct thing. I keep really wanting, because I know you haven't really digged into this, but your buddy Russ Hudson, or I don't know how much buddies you are, but he's done such good work in delineating three zones for each instinct, and it's so useful, John. But another time because I do want to stay on typing. So
Tell you that I
um,
know nothing about that
it's
and
good.
nothing about
Yeah.
this try.
Try type. Yeah. No.
I know not. See, at that point, it starts losing me.
Mm,
And part of it, maybe it would have been different 20 years ago when I was just learning about it.
yeah.
You know, but I'm so much into the phenomenology of my type and the phenomenology of life as the fundamental connection with consciousness itself, that it's not conceptual in nature, that I don't have a lot of interest or need, I think, at this time to understand my Enneagram type anymore. You
No.
know, the Enneagram is great for opening the door, getting you through it, helping you to move toward developing, opening up certain capacities and what have you. But my opinion, and this is my humble opinion, and not to say that a totally opposite opinion isn't as valid as this, but I don't feel like personally I need to investigate my Enneagram type anymore.
Mm,
You know, I've been ushered into the essential world. That's where
yeah.
my attention is. You know, and going back to the point made earlier, I'm much more interested in what's happening right now, who am I, and I'm totally aware that my Ennea type isn't going to be around for the celebration. Why should I be investing more time into it?
Yeah, that makes complete sense to me. I mean, I've lost interest in the Enneagram, and I'm only five years in. When I hear people talking about it, I move away. I'm not interested in really talking about it for the most part.
Well, that's interesting because you're doing this whole video series.
Well, John, the series that we have started in many ways comes from my love of the Diamond Approach and my desire to be close to the Approach, including representatives of the Diamond Approach. In terms of the name of my whole gig, this was years ago that I the practical Enneagram was named, but it's not. I still I'm still very much of the view that the Enneagram can support the early work, including in the Diamond Approach. So, and I think that it can support specifically the practice of inquiry, not open-ended inquiry, because that's a experiential diving, but the targeted inquiries we do as we're exploring essence as mapped by the Diamond Approach. I believe it's useful to have the knowledge of one's type in the background of those inquiries.
Well, and I should say that it's not like I don't continue to get insight into myself from
Mm,
the Enneagram, and it still serves me to recognize, oh, I'm reacting. Okay, here's my Ennea type showing up. Here's my history is a better way to put it, I think. Here's my history showing up, and here are the grooves and ruts in that history and in my psyche that are activated and operational now in this moment. So having that understanding of the Enneagram and the dynamics of one's type continues to serve along the journey to go, oh yeah, it wakes me up.
mm,
It's like,
mm.
oh, well, which is much easier on me than a two by four.
Many teachers in the Diamond Approach, long-time students too, but I find it more concerning with teachers who tell me, I don't get the Enneagram, I never saw the use of it. And it bothers me a little bit, John. What you just said seems true. Like once you're a certain stage in the path, that learning or studying your type is not interesting or of use. But to me, and my own teacher is not an Enneagram person, as in he never identified his type. And while I don't care that he doesn't know my type, I actually prefer it because it I think it's more open. That he doesn't know his type bothers me because you're not conscious of the way that the fixation is maybe even running in how you're doing your teaching or how you're conducting your sessions.
Well, I think it's a valid point, but I'm not so concerned about it because the Enneagram is just a model. A person can be using a totally different model, psychological model, to understand themselves. You can understand yourself uh, through just standard psychological insight,
Mm.
character structure and defenses and all that. You don't have to wire it all into a model to understand yourself deeply or map it onto the Enneagram. Like I said, I used to think psychology was a bunch of weirdness. I feel the same way about astrology and the tarot and other things, but people use those systems, and it seems to provide a lot of insight into the same realm we're talking about, and maybe even more insight in some situations when it comes to emotional insight and intuitive insight. So it doesn't concern me that a Diamond Approach teacher might not know their Enneagram type, much less be interested in the Enneagram. Uh, Even when Hamid teaches things like the Enneagram of the Holy Ideas, okay, you can study that without knowing or being interested in the Enneagram because you're just talking about 9 views of reality
Mm.
that are applicable to all souls in this dimension. Okay? Now, maybe it the 9 holy ideas. There's not a lot of teaching about like moving from one holy idea to another, like on the Enneagram where you're defensive and whatever. They do connect that way. Okay?
Mm.
But I wrote an article on my blog, and it's very hard to articulate this, but it came to me as a kind of like an inner vision of the Enneagram from a fourth, fifth, or sixth dimensional perspective, to where we are looking at a two-dimensional representation, which we call the Enneagram. But if you include time in that, the dimension of time, if you include space time, if you include other dimensions, that thing turns into more of like an interweaving double helix type of thing. It
Mm.
is not a flat thing at all. If you bring in the dynamism of what's happening and you look at that with your inner vision, it doesn't look anything like how we look at it on a piece of paper.
Mm. Interesting. Um, John, so Hamid has written in one of the books that at a certain point when as we're doing the deep work, we're getting in touch with our deeper layers, freedom from the superego, we can start to feel like a different type. And I've heard many people start to doubt their type, and I think there's something true about this, and it's to do with the soul child. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I can relate to that, although I've
Mm.
never confused myself with my type. But the soul child is a good thing to address because, like I said, for a defended 8 with independence and the amount of of aggression, which is a big problem for people, because most people relate to aggression as some kind of charged conflictual thing. But aggression is best understood maybe through the instincts, that it's just one of the forces moving life along. Okay. It doesn't have necessarily any hostility or negativity in it. It's a force. Okay? So the movement into my soul child uh, makes me think that I'm doing these promotions now for Nurturing Essence, where I'm using my soul child image in them. Me at 5 years old. And if you look at that guy, he is a frumpy cynic, has a very gray view of the world. Okay? So moving over to type 2, the first hit for me was the sense of around vulnerability, losing my invulnerability, and having to experience this neediness, this gooiness, this kind of like emotional snot, and being more susceptible to guilt, which was my mother. Okay. And my friend Holly and I, we just started calling it the needy mess, which is kind of the first hit. You have to
Mm.
work with some of that stuff and clarify it to get to the gold underneath it. But I never got so lost in 2 that I thought, well, I'm a 2. And yet that is very connected to my heart space, very
Mm.
connected to this social instinct.
Yeah.
I mean, it helped line all that up and go, oh, I see. My heart space is much more involved in my day-to-day, you might say, interactions with my sexual subtype. Mhm.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I agree that it would be difficult to think that you were the other type, but the connection I can make to the passion of the one, the resentment, the anger, they do at this stage feel very dominant in my experience, much more so than, should we say, envy.
That's probably one of the gifts of Oscar Ichazo, which he had like 125 different Enneagrams,
Mm.
okay, which will help, might support people in seeing that you're all of these types. You're moving everywhere depending on these different things that he puts Enneagrams on. And on one Enneagram, some quality that is part of, say, the character structure of 8 or 4, when you're looking at the basic uh, Enneagram thing, that quality is over on some totally different type when it has to do with something different,
Mm.
like rules and regulations. I think he has one called rules and something. Okay. So when that is kind of the world you're in, you're dealing with the world of rules and regulations, that quality of 8 may be more prominent over in 1 or
Mm-hmm.
5 or something like that. So it helps you see that ultimately we're all of this. All of this is operating in us. And the point you were making earlier, when it came to wings, I feel fairly balanced with the influence of 7 and 9. They both have a huge impact on me. And depending on what's going on in life, I can be a couch potato or I can be out, going bonkers from life, you know? So they can show up either way. But again, I was so landed in 8, so definite about it. I don't think that I used everything. First of all, when I found out I was an 8, when I said, my response was, thank God, who'd want to be anything else? But I don't think that I was necessarily using everything to justify staying an 8, because my relationship to it has to do with energetic dynamics. Really. I never left that connection to what's moving me.
Mm.
What's the phenomenology of 8 over at 2, the impact of the 9 wing on 8. I'm relating to it all as these internal dynamics that are going on, these internal forces.
Yeah. This is a good segue into something I've been wanting to ask you to do with the centers. So, when I came to the Diamond Approach, my head was full of Enneagram knowledge about the centers, and that in the Enneagram world, it's taught that each type has a dominant center or is a core center, and then a repressed center as well. And I don't know how useful that is. It certainly wasn't useful for me when I came to the Diamond Approach because it had a sort of anti-inquiry effect. But I'm curious to know what does it mean to you to be a body type? So what does that mean practically in terms of how you related to development work in the Diamond Approach?
Let me throw this out at you and see how this affects you. Get your response to this. In our world today, we have become much more and more head-centered. Everybody is head-centered because we have these minds that are constantly processing information. But societies, as it has developed, has oriented people more and more and more toward their head. And so a lot of people walk around thinking they're head centered, that they're not. Okay.
Yeah.
They think that because of the predominance of engagement with the head center that the world requires. Okay? But to be a real head-centered person has much more to do with essential qualities like brilliancy and uh, inner vision, perception, that type of thing. Okay.
Mm.
So it's the quality of your head center that one needs to pay attention to, not just the fact that they're in their head the whole time thinking. Everybody's in their head the whole time thinking. Mhm.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I think a lot of people get take the wrong turn, so to speak. They're chasing a red herring. If you think you're a head-centered person, give it some thought, give it some real thought.
Yeah, I agree with you. That is a really difficult, it's really easy to assume you're a head type. Everyone feels like a head type now. Equally, like the heart repressed types, apparently, types 3, 7, and 8. That's tricky too because we are all shut off from our feelings, in my opinion. I know that I have been and am.
Well, I certainly was. I was surprised to have survived reconnecting with my feelings.
Really.
Yeah, yeah, I'm not kidding. Yeah, it was a roller coaster for about 6 months,
Mm.
and it took a couple of several nuclear explosions for it to happen. One of which was I thought I was having a conversation or argument or something with my wife at the time, and we're going down the freeway, and she tries to jump out of the car because she couldn't handle the intensity of things. We weren't yelling or anything like that. It wasn't like a major fight, but there was some kind of disagreement. She couldn't handle the intensity of the frustration or what have you. And
Mm.
I'm thinking we're just having this conversation, like this disagreement or whatever. She opens the door to jump out of the car. I'm like, what the hell? Holy cow. Uh, well, there were a couple more things that were more intense than that brought this wall down around me. And then it was quite literally like this, like, oh my God. And I thought, no wonder people act so weird. All this stuff is hitting them all the time, you know? And what happened was, it, you're probably too young, But in the 50s and 60s, we used to buy this cleaning product called Spick and Span. It was a
Hmm.
powdered soap type thing. And inside those boxes, you'd get this wafer, right? A square wafer like this, and you'd throw it in water and it would plump up into a
Hmm.
sponge. It was a compressed sponge, right? That's what happened in life. People plumped up. And I realized I had been living in a world of cardboard cutouts because I was not including this interior world of emotions and feelings in people. It was, and then it was like if you took somebody that was raised in uh, a pygmy raised in the forest, right? And they're used to a particular sound. And you dropped them in New York City. The blare, the noise, it was that was overwhelming. But these extreme emotions, the emotions that people would go, oh yeah, a little pain, a little sorrow, a little whatever. But for me, they were like boom, 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 boom. It was crazy.
Wow, that sounds really difficult, John, and it's helping to contextualize a lot of the things you've said in our previous conversations. Like that's a heart center coming online for sure. As I've wondered about the body types. I do think, although we spoke previously, the Diamond Approach is definitely a path with heart. It's not a heady path. It has a lot of knowledge and a lot of precise knowledge that has come from a head type. So there is that. But I wonder about the body types, like whether they're met by the practices and the approach of the Diamond Approach.
Well, as a body type, the thing that is foremost in my awareness with learning about the Enneagram and the three centers is the way that my body is an instrument for assessing the environment and a situation. So as an eight, I'll walk into a room and without consciously doing it, I've already identified the one or two people that I'll have to kill to survive if push comes to shove. You know, it's an energetic thing. It just happens like, okay, there's the threat right there and there. Okay? It's like I said in the last I think video we did, swapping places with that six, standing next to a six and feeling that anxiety and what have you. Okay. That isn't a thinking process that happens. That is, standing next to a four, feeling that huge chasm of emotion. That's a physical thing for me.
Yeah, got it. So there's a sensitivity there. Can you talk to me about your relationships with the practices of the Diamond Approach? So, in the beginning, how easily well did you take to meditation and inquiry and sensing practice? And where are you now with those? What do you do?
Yeah, yeah. I want to run an experiment with a new friend of mine over the course of a month. And I'm going to put this to her at the end of this video
Oh, it's me. Yeah.
about sensing, looking, and listening, and phenomenology. So meditation, I would say, oh yeah, I meditate. And it would be like once a week or once a month. And basically, what I would really be saying is I sit still, I have my eyes closed, I'm concentrating, I'm doing all the things that aren't meditation from my perspective now. But I was on this other spiritual path. And one of the things I noticed fairly early on is when I would sit down to meditate, this field of blue would emerge. And I could get lost in that, meaning that it would just kind of move into me, right? And then over the years, it would turn like cobalt blue and then blue black and what have you. And this relates to two essential qualities, which I didn't know about. But still, meditation was difficult because I was trying to stop my mind from thinking, which is totally impossible and does nothing but bring more tension and conflict into one. The big breakthrough in that realm was when I realized I don't have to pay attention to my mind. It can do whatever it wants. Why is my attention over there?
Yeah.
And again, the the big development or pivot point was on the phenomenology of meditation. Getting out of my head about meditating and having some idea about it and just landing in the phenomenology of my experience. I'm just here, you know, and I'm not trying to get anything out of being here. There's no agenda, there's no focus. It's basically, you know, just experiencing the experience of experiencing, being. And your mind will start all kinds of different cascades of thinking and association. But that's just surface to just being deep in the experience of existence itself, isness, right? And making that connection, which many saints and masters point to as, the most important to land in the I am. But I, being an eight, just introducing the word I into anything for me is problematic because my strong ego self takes over.
Mm.
But through meditation, more significantly through sensing, looking, and listening, I connected to and was able to recognize existence and isness as foundational to every experience I'm having. I'm there, so to speak. But the I is just implicit. I don't have to think about I'm existing, you know. There's just the awareness of existence. That existence is happening. That I am this existence, you could say. But existence is existence. Worrying about the I and claiming it, that is problematic for me.
Mm-hmm.
And yet there's a recognition of what I am is this existence.
Yeah. That's interesting. So sensing, looking, listening has been very.
Sensing, looking, and listening, I'll tell you. Uh, and I started to write a book about it, but I haven't quite gotten there. Then I was thinking that this little experiment I'm going to do with you, maybe you'll write the book. But early on, like maybe less than 10 years into the Diamond Approach, one of my teachers said that Hamid had told them early on that all you need to do is sense, look, and listen. That's the only thing you need to do. It will lead you to everything. He says, as a matter of fact, and this is John telling me about Hamid, saying that everything I teach is sensing, looking, and listening. I just wrap it in different words so you don't lose interest. But it's all sensing, looking, and listening. And 15 years later, another senior teacher was giving a talk and said the same thing, related the same experience. And I have found it to be true
Mm-hmm.
because sensing, looking, and listening is directly connecting one to consciousness. The phenomenological experience of consciousness is uh, connected to our five senses or eight senses and our thinking process. If you reduce those, if you follow those to their phenomenological ground, they lead you to the direct experience of consciousness. which is what we're all seeking, which is the major doorway into reality. It is reality.
Well, I'm eager to crack on and discover about this. So, and I think we've covered some good stuff. So, thank you for listening, and feel free to ask John any questions. I will read the questions if you post comments. So, thank you, John, for your time. Yeah, we covered actually fair bit more than I thought we would. So, um, let's experiment. I'm ready.